Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm Gary Polland from the right.
I'm David Jones, and I'm from the way left.
This week we're going to be talking about gun control and gun rights, David. And we have two really important guests that we're going to talk to about it. First, Jacquie Baly. Jacquie is a GOP consultant and well-known media personality and a friend of the show, and former congressman, former state senator, and outstanding lawyer Craig Washington. So we have a Democrat and a Republican, and they've probably forgotten more than we know, David.
Yeah, but I'm sure that they're going to be agreeing on a lot of things.
Of course.
I think that's Red, White, and Blue is about coming to,
the middle.
Right. So let me just lay out one profile of one case that brings in several issues. I'm not going to explain all those issues or take my position on those issues, but let y'all do that, and Gary as well, and that is Sandy Hook, where there were 20 kids killed in 2012, 20 dismembered 7-year-olds. It was after the assault weapon ban had been lifted or expired. It was a mentally ill kid, throw that in. And it was also after the legislative immunity was granted by the Republican Congress to the gun industry. So what issues are presented there that most interest you about Sandy Hook, which many people say when the Republican caucus refused those parents' wishes for background checks, to said that's the end of any efforts for doing anything sensible with gun regulations.
Ladies first.
Okay. Well, first of all, you did mention the fact that there was a mental issue. And with most instances like this, there's usually something mentally off with the person who's committing this crime. You often hear from the left whenever we have instances like these that we need to start tightening the regulations on our gun rights, and that would not impact someone like this person or the person from Las Vegas or anyone else. That would impact someone like me, a law-abiding citizen who wants to carry my gun legally. And all the instances that we've seen legislation proposed, especially the last several years, they're talking about specific instances that would not have impacted the last 2 or 3 or 4 years of mass of these kinds of destruction.
Well, go ahead, Craig.
I think that if we can ever stop talking about left and right and conservative and liberal and all those labels that we use to divide God's creatures from each other and talk about other things, we can probably find common ground, because that makes more sense. Take the politics out of it. A lot of little bitty children, little tiny kids got killed for nothing. And we're smart human beings, and we live in what we call the best country in the world with the smartest people. We ought to be able to figure out a way to do this. If we can get the people who think that someone else is trying to take their guns to stop thinking that everything that has to do with guns is about taking their guns, we can find common ground. I'll be willing to register all of my guns. I own a lot of guns. I'm going to keep all my guns. I'd be willing to register them. I don't have any reason not to. Why don't we have a voluntary register, have the federal government set up a voluntary register for those people who are willing to write down the serial numbers on their weapons? I'd be willing to send mine in, because I don't have any reason to hide the fact that I own them. It's legal for me to own them. And stop this left and right and all this up and down, because that doesn't do anything but just get us talking at each other, not to each other.
Very valid points. Unfortunately, the climate in D.C., and whenever a lot of legislators, not you, sir, but a lot of legislators, when they are talking about gun control and gun rights, unfortunately, it is from a political angle.
Yeah.
You talked about compromise. One example of that would be the NRA. They said that they would compromise and look at and consider ATF regulations. Well, some people were saying that's not enough, and some people were saying that's too much. We have to remember that a lot of these regulations that, again, those from the left are saying that we need to look at again were approved in 2010 under the Obama administration. So it makes sense that the NRA are saying, go ahead and look at it again, because they'll get approved again.
Well, one thing that Obama passed, which was repealed by Donald Trump, was the placement of mentally ill people on the database for being able to be background checked. He eliminated that regulation. All right? So, yes, it is political. And the NRA spends 80% of their money on Republicans.
Why do we have to choose sides?
That's
Well,
the partisan divide.
Craig,
But somebody else is making that. They're making us, and it's more than about guns. It's more than about politics. Politics has become a popularity contest. Anywhere you look, I mean, who cares about polls? The only poll that counts is the one on election day. And everyone ought to have the right to register and vote unless we can find some reason to keep them from voting. And we ought to be encouraging people to vote instead of discouraging people to vote and let the best person win. So if you two are running against each other and Jackie and I are the only voters and one other person, because we need an odd number, let's pick this camera guy over here. Instead of you trying to convince two of us, instead of him trying to convince two of us, you try to get his voters to stay at home. He tried to get your voters to stay at home so that one of you gets 2 votes, the other one gets 1 or none. That's not an election.
But I'm going to address what you said directly because it sounds like you're trying to say because our president is Republican and he
bragged about having the NRA support.
Well, as he should. The NRA is a very good group. I'm a member of the NRA.
So am I.
And in the South, you'll see it will cross party lines. A lot of Southerners,
Shouldn't be any
regardless
party
of an
lines
R or a
about
D
guns.
next to your name, are proud members of the NRA. But I will say this. I do feel that regulations, especially when it comes to getting a gun, should be looked at just like we look at our business plan every year for our own businesses. Just because it's sitting there and it's on the books doesn't mean that it's always correct. There are times you look at some modifications. I am not a proponent of loosening when it comes to checks for mental capacity or mental illness, because there's a large percentage of these people who are committing these crimes do have mental problems. So that is one area that I feel that we need to continue to keep behind.
I was going to ask this, because Craig, you brought up you'd be willing to voluntarily register. Well, isn't that in essence what we have with concealed carry permits? You voluntarily sign up with the state, and I think maybe it's 30 states now that you can do it, and you have to go through a background check.
Right.
You get approved.
Right.
They know you have guns because you have registered, right?
They don't
So
know what guns you have.
No, but they know you have guns.
Right.
And then you get the permit.
Right.
So that would be an example of people who are voluntarily registering themselves to do that. In addition, some statistic I was looking at said that concealed carry, wherever it is, reduces gun violence. And the most latest example is what happened in South Texas at the church, where the neighbor heard what was going on and got his illegal gun and went out and killed the perpetrator.
But that wasn't a concealed carry weapon. It was a rifle that he had.
It was the exact same weapon that the actual.
Right.
That's not, you don't need a permit to carry one of those.
And there's
But in David's world, you do.
there is no dispute that the states with the strongest gun regulations have less violence than those with loose ones. Do you know an 18-year-old mentally ill kid can walk into a Houston gun show today and buy an AR?
Well, that's not true.
Yes, they can.
The most gun-violent cities in the country are Washington, D.C.,
without being
Baltimore, and Chicago, all with
What do they have in
significant
common?
regulations.
What are those
Well, they have
three cities?
significant anti-gun
They
regulations.
have significant black people there too. And if we had had guns after the Civil War, when the white people went off and left us down here with these Southerners when they went back north, we wouldn't be in the position we're in now, would we?
I'm in a
Because
good
the
position.
KKK wouldn't march up on your step if they know you got a gun in your house. So
That's
black people
true.
need to get in the NRA and get
Yes.
them plenty of guns.
Which is really the point you're making,
Right.
because you'll see that between 2009 and 2014, speaking of statistics, 92% of these mass shootings happened in gun-free zones. So the fact that, and a lot of these people have said that they felt that if they were in a city like Houston, that there would be more harm to them than
What do
they
you
would
much
be
uncertainty of who's carrying?
Identify a gun-free zone. Where is that in
the definitions-
Where is that in legislation?
The definitions may vary from very hard to acquire a gun to not allowed to have a gun in that area at all, like a church.
Right.
Or a courthouse, or a place where alcohol is served,
Right.
Exactly.
or a school zone.
Here's what happened. Here's what happened after the 2005 abandonment of assault weapon ban. All right. Here's what happened: 58 dead in Las Vegas, 49 dead in Orlando, 32 dead in Virginia Tech, 27 in Sandy Hook, 26 in the little church outside of San Antonio, Sutherland, 18 Binghamton, New York, 10 in rural Alabama, 13 shot by a soldier, other soldiers dead in Fort Hood, and just
horrible.
yesterday, 6 dead in Northern California. We're
that's
talking
horrible.
about massive amounts of shootings that are as a result of the cowardice of legislators to put an end to it, where they know,
That's
where they, know they
incorrect.
can.
But
That's
How
incorrect.
are they going to put an
Misdescribed
end
it.
to it?
Well, that's incorrect.
How are they
too.
going to put an end to it?
You can't think of a solution?
No, I can't think of a. You can't take guns from people who legally own them.
That's David's solution.
Right.
No,
No,
that's
you
not.
can't- no.
I don't- I
He's
didn't-
not advocating taking guns away from people. He's advocating tightening up on the qualifications of people who are fit to own guns.
And again, going back to my original point, that's not going to impact all of those people, the people who did all of those killings. If we actually do pass legislation to make it more difficult for people to acquire guns, that's not going to impact those people.
Can you
And the
I
church
didn't
Can you
shooting,
identify which
and
one
the
of
church
those?
shooting,
Can
the
you
church
identify?
shooting specifically, if it weren't for the fact that that man was an NRA instructor and did have a rifle, that entire church would have probably have been dead, unfortunately.
Well, I forgot the
That's
9.
not true.
I forgot the 9
wait a
people.
Minute, wait a minute. Don't obfuscate the facts. As I understand the facts, Jackie, the man left the church and went outside.
And got his gun.
No, he had the gun. He shot the people. You mean in Texas?
The defender. You're talking about the defender.
Correct.
No. The man was out. The man had left the church and was getting rid and had hijacked or was trying to hijack a car. That doesn't have anything to do with killing any more. He'd kill all the people in the church that he planned to. He may have killed some other people somewhere, but not in the church.
The fact that he was shot himself
Right.
stopped him in his tracks from killing other people. That
Right.
is my point.
Right, but not other people in the church. I
Well,
thought I
he-
heard you say other people in the church.
Well, killing other people.
And the other thing,
You're right.
David lists his list of these mass shootings, but the fact is 2/3 of the gun deaths in America are suicides. The fact is that the number of mass killings
With
is
guns,
really a
not
small,
knives.
Yeah, not that's suicides with guns, and the vast majority of the cases are not mass shootings. Shootings. They're not.
We
I mean,
started
just
out
a
with
small
a
minority.
well-regulated militia was where this started out, and that's where it should end up. The people who don't want regulations are afraid that the government is going to come and take their guns.
They do.
Right?
They are afraid.
And they should be afraid.
They should.
What should they be
Because-
afraid of? The FBI?
Well,
Yeah.
the whole purpose of the Constitution is to protect against the tyranny of the majority, as I understood. That's the way I understood the Constitution. And so if the government gets in a position where they don't want you to have a gun for some reason, and they don't have a legitimate reason to stop you from having a gun, then they don't have the right to come and take it.
Well, it's not feasible to take away guns from law-abiding citizens, and that's something that's not possible. Just like it's not going to be possible to send every illegal back to wherever they came from.
It's not possible to take guns away from criminals either.
Well, unfortunately not. And like Chicago has very strict restrictions and strict regulations, but yet that you continue to see.
And by the way, in Chicago, what's interesting is
And
the
a lot
low
of them get
level
their
of
guns-
prosecution, low level of gun law violation prosecutions. They
When
just
was
don't
there a
do
mass
it.
shooting in Chicago? Why y'all keep talking about these cities where all the black people are?
Chicago
Let's talk
is where
about
there's lots of people getting
Hello?
killed every day.
I didn't-
But
none
we're
of those
talking about
cities
the
that I
mass
mentioned-
shootings, right?
Well, I would consider it mass. There's
Okay.
more murders in Chicago
I don't
than anywhere else in
remember-
the country.
Baltimore, Chicago, the places that you all are talking about are not places where there were the mass. Las Vegas. Let's talk about where the mass shootings were, not where they weren't.
Let's talk about the ethnicity of the people who were doing the mass
Well, the
shootings.
reason why
they
I
were
talk-
white guys.
And let's talk about
Right.
their
White
political
guys.
affiliation.
I agree.
Please could tell me, Jackie.
Atheist.
Please tell me.
A majority of them are non-Christian. A majority of them lean to the left. A majority of them do not have
on,
strong
man.
faith.
What
Definitely.
does that have to
No,
do
you
with
just
owning
said
a
they were.
gun?
You just said they were crazy.
They're
Well, the
non-Christian.
difference
They're
They're
between
non-Christian.
the
Right,
difference.
Oh, so if they read the Bible, then they won't have a gun.
No, if they read the Bible,
If
then
they read the
won't
Bible,
do mass
they
shootings.
won't kill. Hopefully.
These people got killed in the church. Were they Christian people that were in the church?
No,
I
she's
hope
talking
so.
about the
I'm talking
perpetrator.
I'm talking about the people who are doing the killings.
But why are you
They
associating?
definitely don't have God in their heart at the time that they are shooting innocent
Who
people.
hired you to make that decision?
Yeah, where are you an
Who
analysis
elected
of?
you to make the decision about who has God in their heart?
Are you a
Come on, man.
profiler of mass
That's
shooters?
the problem we got.
Do you have a
Well,
degree
I
in
think-
Talk at
profiling
each
mass
other instead of
shooters?
to each
Well, I
other.
think it's safe to assume that if you have God in your heart, you're not going into a church to
Well,
kill
if you,
people.
if you have God in your heart, we don't need guns at all then, dear.
Well, not all
If
of us have.
everyone has God in their heart, then according to your theory, we can just obliterate all the guns that exist in the world and we don't have any more
And
wars.
that would
And
be
I'm
true
in favor of
if
that.
everybody had God in their heart. That would
Right.
be right.
I agree with that.
Exactly.
But that's
Okay, you're-
not our
But I
country.
never said
So
everyone had
the
God
test
in their
then
heart.
should become, do you have God in your heart? Here's your gun. If you don't have God in your heart, you can't have a gun. The Second Amendment
Well,
doesn't
I don't
apply
want
to
someone
you.
like him determining if I have God in my heart.
And I don't want someone like him determine if I have God in my heart either. But you're the person that brought up whether people had God in their heart or not.
It's just a natural assumption that if God is in your heart, you're not going to go around killing people.
No,
Silly
you hang
me.
out at the mall
Silly
and you
me.
hit on little 14-year-old girls. That's what you do when you have God in your heart.
That's not the subject this week.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about some solutions. All right.
Okay.
My solutions are background checks at gun shows, no-fly zone. People are able to purchase a handgun or a weapon of any sort. That, of course, was voted down by your party. Limits to the magazines and to the 30 rounds in a magazine. Okay. That too was voted down by your party. Limits to the number of guns that you could purchase. Gun show loophole closed. And by the way,
I want to correct you. You
Yeah.
say it was voted down by my party. It was voted down by some in your party too.
But it doesn't need to be political either
since
way.
2005, the Democrats haven't controlled anything.
Yes, but they do have members who vote.
Well,
They have-
and David, come on.
The problem is the fact
Look at this
that
list.
our political system is rotten to the core. That we have people who get elected who do nothing more than get elected, to get reelected, and they're afraid of the NRA. They don't have the courage to stand up to the
It's not just the
NRA.
NRA. They're afraid of everybody.
They're afraid of
I
action
agree.
too.
But while we're on the subject of guns, the NRA is the driver. We can't even get bump stocks.
No,
Come on
actually, I
now.
think they support that.
No,
rid
but
of
they
bump
don't want it in
stocks.
the legislation because you can amend legislation to put other things in there. They want you to do it
Limited.
by executive order or by regulation.
Yes.
And they're supposed to be opposed. Let's stop this left right. You know, before we had left and right, before we had Republican and Democrat, we had human beings. If we could get back to human beings and stop labeling each other in terms of who's for this and who's against that, because the only people that win are the rich people who have all the rest of us poor people fighting each other over the crumbs at the table.
What is left, right? Please
We
tell
need
me.
to
It doesn't mean anything to me. I
Please
didn't
tell
use
me
that
what
term.
it,
Y'all used it.
I've never said anything.
I use that term. I can tell you.
I said a bunch of. I said that there were a bunch of dead people. Not
I
all of them
agree.
killed by madmen.
Let's go back to the 20
Okay.
little children. They
Okay.
weren't left or right.
No. What about the 9 people praying in the church in South Carolina?
20 little children.
Well,
20 little children. That's the one you can't get around.
right. And that's the
Sandy
one.
Hook is the-
That's the one where the parents were standing outside of the Republican caucus with their kids' pictures, asking them to vote for background checks, and they went in there and they voted it down.
Okay.
That
you
wasn't
said that
because of
4
politics. That was
times.
because of the fact that they're afraid. If the people in this country
they
will
don't
ever
matter.
wake up and realize that the politicians should and ought to be and are more afraid of them than they are of the politicians, we could get something done.
Yeah, but the problem, Craig.
We have free airways. We have free postage. Why you have to raise $1 million to run for state representative when you ought to be able to get the send out your newsletter, make up your newsletter and send it out free. Get on the airway for free. Then we cut out all of the graft in the politics, because that's what the problem is. If you have to sit in your office and entertain someone and they come in and talk to you about your issue, about your street being paved or whatever, and then by the way, on the way out, hand you a check for $10,000, that's what's wrong with politics.
Well, yeah.
If you get rid of them, then you don't have to be afraid of the people. You can go out and wade down where the people are and talk to them about real issues and tell people no. Most politicians will never tell you no. If you ask me a question, I'm running for office, you ask me a question, the first thing I do is try to figure out what answer you want.
So back
Instead of
when-
saying, no, I'm against what you're for.
Back when you were in office, you did have gentlemen in office who did exactly what you're saying.
Some, but not many.
Who listened to each other, regardless if there was a
And you
D
worked
or
on
an
a
R.
bipartisan basis.
However,
More than
However,
people know. And I didn't send out newsletters either, and that's another problem.
However,
I
during-
didn't take once a month to pat myself on the back and tell you, dear Gary, this is what I did for you this month.
my point is,
That's
during
why
these
I'm not
times,
in office anymore.
my point is, during
And I'm
these
glad I
times, when
didn't.
I'm glad I
someone
didn't say
like
that.
him will come over
I'm
with a
glad I
list
did.
and say, these are my resolutions,
Right.
you're going to immediately have people from the right, and if you want me to explain to you what the right and the left means, I will gladly do that. But you'll have
Tell me
people
what that means.
immediately.
Tell me what
you'll
that
have
means
people
to you.
immediately on the right.
What does that mean?
What
Right.
does right and
With
left
respect
mean?
to guns,
I'm to the right
what
of
does it
you.
do?
I'm conservative.
What does that have to do with dead kids?
You to the left of him. He's sitting over there.
No, I mean,
you're
really.
You're right. Well, I'm to the right of you.
I
Yes, you
thought
are. and
that-
you may be to the right on me on a couple
Jackie,
of
I
things.
thought the
probably
first
am.
obligation of any government was protect children. Okay?
Yes.
How are we doing that with all these dead kids? All these Orlando dead
Well, before-
17-year-olds.
So how are you? Okay. So how are passing any of these new regulations going to stop what the murder, the mass shooting that just happened?
That's right.
Nothing.
Look at
Nothing
David-
on your list
Right.
would have
Jackie,
stopped
look
it.
at his list because he said
Nothing on your list would
background
have stopped
checks.
it.
He got the guns from his mama.
Exactly.
No purchase, not going to matter. Limits to magazines. Okay, so he only could have bought 10-shot magazines. Would have had more in his pocket. Not going to matter. Limits the number of guns purchased. He didn't buy any guns at Sandy Hook. Gun show loophole. Mama bought them legally.
Exactly.
There's your list.
What
Does
do
nothing.
we do
Your
whenever
list
we
will
want
do
to stop
nothing to
somebody
really
You
from
got
doing
irresponsible
something?
mama.
What do we do as a society whenever we want to stop? Really, when we're serious about stopping something from happening,
Well,
we make it illegal.
as a-
You mean
we make it a real serious felony.
You probably remember this. There was a woman who was about to die, and she had a child.
Right.
Her name was Terry
Criminal
Schiavo. Her name was Terry Schiavo, and the Republican Congress rushed back to Washington to pass a law to protect a fetus who was going to die. Now that's
That
what
has
is
nothing to do with guns.
It has everything. To,
that's David.
it has everything to do whenever you concentrate your power
I
to
agree with all-
accomplish something.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. All of this folds right back into this one hole, and that is politics has become rotten because it's become a popularity contest. It's not what you articulate and what you stand for and what you believe in. It's how many votes you can get and how you can smile.
Right.
You said earlier that we're not listening to each other.
Right.
He presented his list. He said, this is my list of resolutions. None of those actually are true resolutions or solutions to what's going on with mass shootings. But he's still going to make that list and still make that case because everything that he says, it starts out with your Republican president or your Republican Congress.
Let's take your point. Let's take the list and have an intelligent discussion about the list rather than throwing the list back and forth. Don't exclude anything. Don't include anything. Have an articulate, intelligent. We're intelligent people. We can go down that list and find things that we can agree on.
Yeah, but I think what the difference is David's suggestion that list was going to prevent the killing of the 20 children at Sandy Hook, and it wouldn't have. So that's the point. You're in a different position. You're saying is we should have a discussion about different ideas and
Forward.
Not
There's nothing we can
related
do
to
about it.
Sandy Hook.
Whatever happened
Generally.
yesterday will
Yeah.
never be changed.
Exactly.
We can change tomorrow by talking about it today. We can't change anything that's already happened. And
But
we spend too much
unfortunately-
time
I'll tell you what you can-
throwing
Unfortunately-
spitballs at each other like little
Yes,
children.
that's exactly what I was going to say. Unfortunately, when you have people who immediately, when something like this happens, use it as their pulpit for to push their political agenda, that's when the conversation is lost.
I agree.
And that's what you're seeing most of.
I
You're
agree.
not seeing anyone discuss
I
solutions.
agree. Right.
Oh,
Let's back
let
up.
me ask
Or we're gonna
Craig,
make
here,
bullet-
you're a
we're gonna
lawyer,
make
so I
points.
got a legal proposition for you.
Okay.
You know that there's an immunity for the gun industry that was passed by the Republican Congress.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
The families
Let's
of
say by the Congress.
I
If you
don't-
take the Republican off,
You can do your nonpartisan stuff all you want to, but you're not going to get me to back off from saying that Republicans are with the NRA.
People
and
already know that.
and everything is
Why?
happening.
Right.
Well, but here's the question: should gun
So-
manufacturers be sued because a mama gives a gun to her son who's crazy and goes shoots up a school? That somehow that's the responsibility of the gun manufacturers.
And none of these
Of
people
course,
are
they should have
NRA
gotten
members.
immunity.
All
What
of
a
these
joke.
people shooting people are not
What a
NRA
joke!
members.
This is just
well,
partisan
no,
claptrap.
I
Well,
don't think you can
you didn't let
slice
me-
immunity that way. With all due respect, I think that we can find some examples of things where we can make life better. The reason that you hear noise when a dump truck backs up, you know why you can hear one? Because someone sued to make that a part of the truck. So there are some smart things we can do. No, you shouldn't sue the manufacturer,
gonna
but you
say,
ought
as
to
a
be
lawyer, are you pushing a lawsuit?
you ought to be able to trace the weapon down to where the last intelligent person
There should be responsibility
let it
there.
get into the hands.
So the mother has
of
responsibility.
Whomever put it and
I
back
would
it up
agree.
from there. Negligence, contributory negligence, back it up.
Make it a
Someone
crime.
along the
Make it a
line
crime.
knew or should have known
But
that
instead of-
John Willie Earl should not have had the weapon.
You did
right?
not let me finish
I'm
the
sorry.
legal theory that
It's
is
your
being
program.
put by the plaintiffs.
Unfortunately, David, your time's
well,
about up.
as soon
You'll
as
have to
I-
save that
as
for
I-
the after
No,
show.
I haven't seen the wrap yet. And
Okay,
what
I'm
I'm
listening.
saying is negligent entrustment,
Yes.
where you propose to people, buy our weapons because they will make you feel tough and strong.
Perfect.
Video
I
games
have a
supporting
answer.
same.
Insurance.
Military slogans saying.
Insurance.
Yes.
I have to have an insurance policy to be able to give a gun to Gary. I have to get an insurance policy to do that. And if I'm negligent in entrusting the weapon to Gary, guess what? And he shoots you with it, you can, if you're still alive, can sue my insurance company for me
And
negligently
we let the
entrusting my
congressman
weapon
get their
to
last
him.
word.
Yeah, time's up.
Jackie, thanks for being here. Greg
Thanks
Washington.
for having us.
Thanks for I enjoyed it.
Gary, you did a good job.
Wish it should have been an hour.
We'll
We
see
could
you
go
next
for
week
two.
on
Oh,
Red,
I
White,
think
and Blue.
so. Yeah.